evening, and welcome to Art as Migrant, anchored in the exhibition Displacement, curated by Rahab Alana, on view at the old PWD complex. Taking displacement as a critical node rather than a single condition, this conversation examines how untethering, whether from land, history, language, or time, shapes adaptive personal positions and evolving states of being. The artists before us trace the internal and external shifts, both subconscious and latent, that inform their practices and their social commitments. From these moments of rupture emerge hybrid forms of self representation, born of non mainstream, counter institutional, and anarchival impulses that are no less real for being marginal. In conversation with Rahab, the artists, Hijam Benahud, Shaima Al Tamimi, Nandan Kia, and Ali Arkadi will reflect on these themes and how the figure of migrant and networks of art across South Asia and the Arab world articulate overlapping histories and intimate solidarities. Thank you for joining us. Please join me in welcoming the panel.
We're missing one person. Nandan will be back shortly. We can sit right there. Thank you. I just want to, I guess, begin by, it's going to be a fairly informal conversation, as you might have gathered. But I wanted to thank the Serendipity Arts Festival for inviting us. It's been an absolute pleasure to be here. I guess I want to begin by saying that when I was invited by the festival, to curate this show, it was sort of January last year. I mean, this year, 2025. And for me, as it was the rest of us, Nandan, please join us right here. The world was pretty much turning upside down. I mean, it had been 1 month since Trump had come in. It seemed like there would be no end to sort of an Islamophobic intensification, which India is, of course, part of in that sense. It was a moment at which I felt there was no other commitment I could make to the festival, but to think about how to bridge certain narratives and how to speak from the inside out, outside in. And when we were having lunch earlier, I guess I was thinking about what I was mentioning to the artists is that very often it becomes complicated, tenuous to speak about certain situations which might provoke. It has led to an extreme amount of self-censorship. It has led, even within the Serendipity Festival, to the closure of exhibitions in the past. Right? We're talking about a moment where any single act can trigger other acts and spiral literally out of control. So in this environment of things spiraling constantly, but at the same time, us being very used to an image-saturated, image-infused world in which narratives shift immediately, there's an almost reflex to how people are responding on and offline. In that context, it was a real pleasure for me to engage with artists who were from near and far afield. I mean, Nandan is the only artist from India that I'm working with on this occasion. But I also realized for some reason, there hasn't really been a representation of artists either from the Gulf or from the Arab world in India. And I wanted to really think about why that is. It didn't strike me as something that really had thought and consideration behind it. But maybe there were ways in which we could, cross some thresholds as we got to them. And it's been an absolute pleasure, and I think it happened quite spontaneously and reflexively. And as you will find with everyone's practice, I think, that there are certain anchors and there are certain points of well, there's certain triangulations of experience that show us that there's much in common with the realities that exist elsewhere. So that's just a kind of prefatory note for how displacement as an idea took root. But of course, in this taking root, there was also the idea of being very much unrooted, the idea of very much losing home, finding new homes, finding new locations, finding ways in which these aren't just, quote unquote coping mechanisms. They're very much a real politics in one's real life. And so this transaction, I thought was important to think about, because art then becomes a space of some amount of radical effort and radical engagement with one's own life, because it's negotiating so many parameters, very distinct parameters. Anyway, those are parameters I'd like the artist to talk about on their own. So instead of going quite formally through bios and so on, I wanted to begin by asking every artist to speak about how they have arrived here in their practice. I mean, at this point of time, maybe what would be nice to think about is the work that is on display. Like that was a moment. Often this work that I'm showing is not necessarily work that is produced right now. In Hicham's case, it was produced many, many years ago. I mean, several years ago, over 6 or 7 years ago. It's similar with around 4 years ago for you, Shaima, and it's an ongoing practice for Ali. With respect to Nandan, of course, it's a very, very recent practice. Some of the work has been produced by Nandan specifically for this exhibition. Before I sort of go around, I did want to highlight the artists who are not here, who I've managed to meet. I would even call them friends. I mean, I met Hadi, the Afghan artist who's seeking asylum right now in France at Ali's studio. We met in Paris about 3 or 4 months ago. And that was very important for me. I mean, it was the first time we were meeting. I had seen his work in the UK and in Paris before. They were part of a group exhibition called Dislocations at Palais de Tokyo. A very powerful show whose thematic runs quite closely to the one over here as well. But when it was Hadi Ranawar's work as an Afghan artist, we invited him to make new work. So what we have in the exhibition, you would have seen, is this work which is made with origami planes over the map of Kabul. It's a particularly poignant work. It has a soundtrack. I can tell you about the work that did not come here. So the second work that was invited but could not make it here because there were various issues with customs. And this is another big part of it, because some work has still not arrived here. It's still in transit, though we decided to go with a plan B and C and kind of move with alternatives as we found the barriers come up around us. So Hadi's work was actually made, as his other work is, of match heads. And it's a beautiful work which is actually a carpet, an Afghan carpet made of matchsticks, in which you have the footprint of a soldier. And we weren't able to get that because there were many restrictions on it. But nevertheless, this was an earlier work, and we weren't able to commission a new piece either from Hadi. But we thought, well, let's also consider work that has not been shown here, that has not been seen here. Radha Akbar, on the other hand, who we met together also, I had dinner with them in France some months ago, comes from a practice which is largely infused with performance of late, textile to a great extent, but also using the miniature form. So she's done a particular series called Super Women, which I was very, very drawn to, where she's changing the narrative of individuals or iconic sort of figures performing masculine roles in history, but them being performed by women on the other hand. So I thought that was a very significant work, and when I was speaking to Radha, she was very clear that she wanted to produce work that was made, sorry, it's a bit of a long intro for the artists who aren't here, but she wanted to make work that was speaking to how she felt right now. And her work is obviously infused by how women are treated by the Taliban. It sort of also makes us wonder about our recent sort of political shift and strategy with Afghanistan inviting the hell of the Taliban here, which was a strategic move. Uh, Once the United States seemed to be out of our rear view and front view mirror. But nevertheless, Radha wanted to make that specific work in there, and she was very clear that at this point of time, the treatment of women in Afghanistan is something we should focus on immensely. But we shouldn't let go of the fact that this is going to be an ongoing situation. It needs constant attention. The two other artists who aren't here is, of course, Hassan Hajjaj. He comes from a very distinct practice. He's engaged with pop art, popular culture, fashion to a great extent. But like Hicham, who comes from a Moroccan heritage, he wanted to have a space that was a space of invitation, very much like this, fairly informal, in which people could come and gather and sit around. And that video that you have there, which is speaking of the hijab ban when it was instituted, and how someone is breaking that ban, I thought speaks very poignantly to what we need to do over here distinctly as well, and how easy or not easy it is to do is a question mark. And all of this is invoked by the archival tremors that you find through Akram Zatari's personal work. Akram Zatari, as you know, phenomenal Lebanese artist who works with politics and history, migration to a great extent, started the Arab Image Foundation with two other colleagues. And I guess the context for his being in this show is what happens when people leave their homes, what do they carry with them but their memorabilia, on the one hand. And the other hand, I think he was invoking for me a very distinct show on how artists produce works in exile for other artists. And this goes back, maybe I'll bring it up later, I have spoken about it before, but how this brings back the idea of the Artists in Exile exhibition in 1978 that happened in Lebanon for Palestine, and which was then destroyed a few years later, and all the artworks in that exhibition were also destroyed by the Israeli forces that bombed the university, Beirut University, where the artworks were collected. Luckily, some of the works from 1978 were on loan to Iran and currently exist in Iran in the Contemporary Art Museum, which is surprising. But I thought that connection with India is particularly strong because it had one Indian artist. And that one Indian artist was Krishna Reddy, who was in Paris at the time. He was on kind of residency between New York and Paris, and he gave one work for the Palestine show in 1978. And this is also an important time historically. There are many publications coming out of Lebanon at the time which are important for India. Faiz Ahmed Faiz is there. He's associated with magazines that are publishing left-leaning thinking magazines. I guess I'm trying to draw these points is because all of these connections that we've had historically, whether it's through Faiz or otherwise, are things that have suddenly gone silent in the present. But before I sort of continue with a few questions, and then even we can ask some questions together, I wanted to begin with you, Shaima. Just tell us a little bit about this work. Some of you might not have seen that work, so it's not really to describe the work, but to say, how did you arrive at the point of making that work specifically? So there's a context that people get to know about your practice a little more.
Hello. Thank you, Rahab, for all your hospitality and generosity and for bringing us to India. I grew up in Abu Dhabi to parents who have moved from Yemen and East Africa. And, growing up in Abu Dhabi with a fairly cosmopolitan population, I went to school with people from all sorts of nationalities. So never really felt like, I was out of place or any of that stuff. My father introduced me to photography when I was 15. at the time, he came up to me, and it was a summer holiday, so I was like, I signed you up for photography classes. And I thought, that's such a weird thing to do, because all you need to do is just click a camera, and that's it. But lo and behold, I was introduced to a whole new concept of, first it was like the technicality of things, and I picked it up. I picked up photography on and off, but was very interested in people and places and spaces throughout my travels. So it was very much from a lens of just kind of being an outsider, and the camera gave me an excuse to chat people up. Until one time, I decided to take a course with GPP, and that was basically my introduction into long form photography, and specifically within personal projects. So the topic that I wanted to talk about at the time was about how the Yemeni diaspora experiences life in the Gulf, which is very different. There's a lot of like systemic racism that isn't necessarily spoken about, but very felt harshly. And it was through that that I basically learned to turn the lens inward, as much as I didn't think that there was a need for that. Again, that was because of my own lack of comprehension, but also I think I just wanted to keep hiding. And I signed up with the Arab documentary photography program, which is where I built some of the images for that project. And a few years later, being stuck in quarantine and COVID, and not being able to travel, which is something I wanted to do, like go to Yemen and sort of talk to my relatives and document their experience as well. Somehow that didn't happen, and because of that, I suppose I always say like COVID to me was a blessing in disguise, because that's when this work turned into the film that's on display at the old PWD building. So it's something that came very gradually. It also kind of made me transition from photography into film, as much as I like actively resisted being a filmmaker. I also work at the Doha Film Institute for the last 15 years, so there's been countless attempts for people to try and push me towards filmmaking, but I've always resisted it for some reason. And now I'm working on a feature film with a very good friend of mine, and we're expanding this narrative into what expats have to go through living in the Gulf, especially if you've lived there for 50, 60 years, whether you're from India or Sudan or Yemen or wherever you come from, you can have a full life there for God knows how many years, but at the end of the day, you will have to leave. And that is a very hard thing to contend with, because you grow up in this transient space where people come and go, but at the same time, especially if you come from a country like Yemen or Palestine, where Iraq, very heavy war-torn countries, it becomes hard for you to imagine a life that your father perhaps called home at some point. And it just informs so much about what you feel you deserve as a person. And that is why I wanted to explore all of these questions within the film. Yeah.
This one is, yes, this one is fine. Thank you very, very much, Shaiba. That kind of is drawing me to invite Ali to speak about himself, this work, but from a different kind of perspective, because when I first came upon your work, when I first was introduced to it, or to you, it was through the lens of photojournalism, right? That was your career. But that is also a career that led you down a path to change your nationality in a very, very distinct way. It's now translated and transformed so distinctly from that moment of being in the zone, on the ground, which you still do. but it changed how and where you have to live. How are your family? And you had to shift and cope. And so when we see your work right now, it also speaks of your biography in a very distinct way. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Um, let's start from Abu Dhabi to Iraq. We do some tour. Um, when I looking for my career now, uh, which is I'm saying career, this all events happening, especially in the period between 80 to, let's say, 2017 in Iraq. And I was there and I witnessed and I see what's happening. And if I look for my career, I see a series of transformations, not just could be only like straight line, you know. This event, it's happening because where we live, where I am, come from. And the place which is I live, it's a border. It's like kind of a border between Iran and Iraq and Kurdistan. And then we call it conflict zone. And we have this line between Iraq and Kurdistan, and we have also a line with Iran, and we have this kind of different identity. This thing, it affect your life in a way, but that independ who you are, what you do. Like example, I come from a family artist. Like my father, he was doing calligraphy Arabic, and we called it al-khatwa zakhrafa. You know, this structure around the calligraphy. And in that time, we leave a war and we do the art in the same time. And then I learn with this Rembrandt painter lighting. It was every day I go through, even with my staff of art, I go to the shelter and we draw during the war. And then the time is gone, the war finished, and then we went through another war, civil war with Kurdistan, then the war with Kuwait, then the economic crisis in Iraq, then 2003. Before 2003, the first displacement was 1999. I was 18 years old. And we went where? I took all my stuff of my father, artwork, instead to transfer oil to Kurdistan from my town. I transfer my artwork, my father artwork, on the donkey. And 5 hours, and my family with my 4 sisters, they went through the checkpoint because I was 18. Then, in that moment, I asked myself, why my father pushed me to took this? Why not other things? Why not money? Why not stuff? Why not the images, the photograph, the families, and other stuff? Then we came back 2003. I came back with camera. Because we had satellite there, we see everything, what's happening around. When US invasion started, they came to Iraq. And then the moment, it's linked me with the journalism. I don't know how and why 2003, only myself, I come back first day with a camera, tape, to document everything, to go Baghdad, to document my families. And then, and that point was changing my way of the perspective of my life. Like example, I started thinking about childhood. I'm looking, okay, we have a tools, we have a camera, but why you didn't document anything? The history is gone. And what I see, no one, they transferred it. And that was big effect on me finishing art school and then doing journalism. And I didn't like to do news. I work with a magazine, newspaper as a freelance. I don't like to be part because I understand they have a different perspective to transform the news. And I try to make my news. Then I start doing 7 years every day, a month, not coming back at home. Big consequences of family, wife, kids, parents. But I was like, I need to document. I can't do anything. I didn't do any art. I didn't do any sketch. Never. I document. I'm saying this is the necessary thing to back to childhood, to document a childhood. Why? Because the war started 2014. I was part of the mentor program with 7 foundation or 7 agencies in that time. Then I understand professionally how I can transfer and how I can document very well, how I can archiving. And then my necessary was doing long-term project. I had 10 projects going in the same time. When I go to South, I meet them. When I come to North, I meet these people. I had the folders and I filled up. And now, we will speak about that after, but that it's pushed me to document. And then, with the last things happening when 2017, I did very nice long-term project in between Fallujah to Mosul, following 2 soldiers, Sunni and Shia, very positive. And I end up with them after 9 months. They did crazy crime against civilian in Mosul. And then 20 days I managed to document very well, to be part of the film documentary, which is make them heroes and show them good guys, which is they against Daesh or ISIS or something like that. But instead to do that as any local journalist with them, or even with working with a very famous agency in the world, no, I decided to took decision to leave my country and to have big consequences. That led me to go to Paris. That was the point. What I can do now, I get addicted with documentation, front lines, my adrenaline. I need some dopamine. My adrenaline is going up. I couldn't. Gilets jaunes happened. I'm run with my cameras, and then I see there's a problem I need to fix. For that reason, I decided to go to fine art school, and then I start to meet amazing people. I start to learn a new technique to involve how I come back to my archive or archive to present a new language and try to communicate with the people. For that reason, I couldn't do any photography exhibition because it does not mean anything. I try to find the materials which is they know it. Through that, I could transfer something. My work is based in honesty, based in documentary and journalism and real event. And I think from that way and that real event, you can build an artistic work or poetry perspective. Yeah, that's I'm here now, the exhibition. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ali, very, very much. So I want to take that this idea of what you said, this idea of location, this location, also in this exhibition comes down to the difficulty of action, the difficulty of making action, and how sometimes it becomes a space in which you cannot move, but you have to move out of. I'm going to ask you and Shaima to help translate for Icham, and this time please ask him for a longish answer, but as to the project that he has, which is called The Whole. I don't know if any of you have seen it, but it's a particular kind of documentary, but also staged photography. But on the other hand, it's talking about a specific social condition. And if you can ask him to talk about that social condition and that form of image making, vis-a-vis his life and his going back to Marrakesh constantly, that would be that'd be nice.
شو هي المشكلة الاجتماعية اللي أنت تتطرق لها في المشروع تبعك؟ أيوة اللي المعروف. وليش بالأخص اخترت هذه المشكلة إنك تتطرق لها بهذه الطريقة بحيث إنك تمزج الدوكيومنتري وعناصر فيه مركبة؟
Je réponds en français ou l'arabe?
لا عربي وأنا بترجم.
استسمح لي أنني لا أتحدث الإنجليزية. بالنسبة للعمل ديالي بصفة عامة، فهو نقد المجتمع المغربي الذي أنتمي إليه.
Okay, so he's apologizing for not being able to speak English, but basically he's saying that his particular work is a critique of the society that he lives in Marrakesh. Okay.
إذن منذ الصغر كنت ألاحظ أن بعض الأشياء التي تحيط بي غريبة جدا، وهذا لم أفهم لماذا كنت يعني كان من الضروري أن أحترمها ولو أنها كانت بالنسبة لي غريبة جدا.
Okay, so from his childhood, he says he's been observing that there are very specific set of rules that exist within the social fabric, and that he's found himself having to respect and observe it, even though none of it made sense to him.
وإلى حد الآن يعني في المجتمع المغربي ألاحظ على أن أشياء شديدة الغرابة، و لا أريد أن أدخل في التفاصيل، ولكن لحد الآن هناك أشياء غريبة جدا لا يمكن أن يتقبل العقل، ولكن ليس عندنا خيار إلا أن نتقبلها.
بس مثل إيش يعني؟ So
أعطي مثلا تصوروا أننا مثلا عندنا في المغرب دولة إسلامية، مثلا عندنا رمضان، فيجب أن نصوم لمدة شهر. فمثلا إذا في الشارع مثلا شربت كأس من الماء، فإنني لا أحترم القانون، وبالتالي أذهب إلى السجن.
Okay, so he's basically making reference to specific social and religious norms that he's found extremely strange, and after trying to pull something very specific, because he's trying to be very diplomatic, gave an example of Ramadan, for example, which is something that Morocco observes as a Muslim country, and what he finds to be very wild is this concept of during that particular month where everyone is fasting, if he were to drink a glass of water in the street, he would go to jail for it, which is, like it's equivalent to a criminal offense when it's not necessarily. So I think what he's trying to say is that he's trying to, critique specific things that are considered very minor but have a very bigger consequence. Yeah. Okay, that's it.
Okay, so can you ask him one more question about that specific body of work, the whole? Like what inspired that specific work?
Okay, شو اللي ألهمك إنك تشتغل على مشروع الفوتوغرافي هذا. أيوة، لأنه يعني هي الصور مثل ما احنا كلنا عبرنا لك أن هي يونيك جدا وفيها creative concept. شو اللي خلاك تتطرق لهذا النوع أو هذا الستايل من التصوير أو الستوري تيلينج؟
يعني أنا شخصيا لا أختار أسلوب.
أوكي.
أصور بطريقة عفوية.
Okay. So he's saying I don't specifically shoot with a style. I shoot in a very organic way. Okay.
يعني طريقتي بالتصوير طريقة يعني ديريكت.
Okay.
يعني لا أحاول أن أختار زاوية معينة و هذه الأشياء التي لا تهمني.
Okay.
يعني أصور بطريقة فرونتال. هذا الشخص أريد أن أصوره فأصوره. لا أنا
Okay. Yeah. He's very direct in his way of seeing a specific frame. It's very straight. He doesn't think too much about angles. It's not about coming up with.
لا أبحث عن استتيقة معينة.
He doesn't look for a specific aesthetic. Yeah.
يعني إذا كانت الأعمال يونيك يعني هذا لا أبحث عن عمل يونيك.
Okay.
أعمله فقط ويخرج كما يخرج.
Okay. He doesn't look for something to stand out as unique. It just comes from the sense of wanting to create, and if it's unique, then that's how it came out.
بالنسبة لهذا المشروع اللي
For this particular project.
الاسم ديالو الحفرة. سميته بالإنجليزية ولا ما أنني لا أفهم الإنجليزية ولكن في النطق أحسن من الفرنسية بالنسبة لي. لو ترو دو هول صافي ارتيست كوا. إذن هذه نقد بالنسبة لي للمجتمع، لأنه كما قلت قبل قليل في مكان آخر أن بالنسبة لي المجتمع المغربي يوجد في حفرة ولا يمكن أن يخرج منها لأسباب متعددة. ولهذا اخترت هذا الميتافور لأصور هذا الأشخاص في حفر توجد داخل منازلهم.
Okay, so the concept of the title, which is the hole, is a very metaphoric connection to the hole that Moroccans find themselves in. And what he really wanted was to sort of expose that in a very direct way. Obviously, hole referring to, the many problems that they're facing.
Well, just to enlighten you about some of that process, as we were having lunch, we were all talking about, well, we were also talking to Hicham in his own space, but what I was fascinated by with respect to those images was very distinctly how there's a very strong, I felt, community imperative within these projects. They all involve individuals from community. And they also ask them to do things. He asked them to do things which they wouldn't ordinarily do, which includes sort of making gaping holes in their homes in order to reach out to one another. And so within the context of displacement, it became, at least for me, to think very closely about the metaphor of reaching out to strangers and to finding portals through which a gap and a hole, which for Hicham is a space which is a space of stasis and being blocked, actually becomes something that can pass through. You pass through one portal to another. It's a distinct idea that sort of struck when this exhibition was coming through. And thinking of portals, I guess I'm going to come down to Nandan. It was a very specific work I was interested in recently, was it commissioned by the Liverpool Biennial? And in one sense, because we've had an association for some years, I was drawn to this idea of that you had of something you said, and maybe you can reflect on that vis-a-vis this work. And if you don't mind me saying it, I mean, you said one thing to me during our conversations that really hit me, and you said, I'm a very Hindu person. I come from a very Hindu space. But all that I'm seeing around me is something that I do not recognize, right? And this work is a kind of representation. Works have become a representation of this moment, which which go beyond irony into absurdity, into questioning the idea of truth. And so you bring up the idea of post-truth quite often in these works, which are glitches, which are fragmented, which is a history being rethought, a moment being rethought. But it seemed it came from a space of a personal displacement, if you could call it that. Could you talk to that?
So, hello everyone. Unlike all my fellow artists, I have lived in this city for 45 years, the city that I was born in. And yesterday I was joking to someone that I'll probably die in that city also. So I'm from Jaipur. I belong to a Hindu, Vaishnav, majority demographic of this country in a predominantly Hindu state. I've had a very, Hindu Baniya upbringing. And so, for me, the displacement is not of a physical nature, but having been in the same place all my life, and if those of you who may be familiar with how Rajasthan is, how Jaipur, the socio-economic, cultural situation, I could say that the city is just our city, its demographic, its different groups. We are like living manifestation of stereotypes, and I mean, it's not a critique, it's a self-reflection really, because I belong to that stereotype. I live it every day, and over time, living there, going through all customs, traditions, rituals, everything, as I've been through it, and like in fact Hisham was saying, that this thing that makes you question. So I've abided for the longest time, and I've gone through them, and I guess thanks to the current socio-political climate, it starts making you question your own existence, your own associations. And I don't, again, mean it in a critical way, but there are points of reference in mythology, in traditions. I mean, if one looks deep enough, carefully enough, there are all kinds of metaphors and analogies that would make us rethink our stance, give us references. And that's where my work here. So briefly summarizing the works that are being showcased, they are built on mythologies. For me, these mythologies are simply childhood stories that mom told us, our mother read out to us, and we, it was a family time, going through these lovely stories of gods and monsters killing each other, and the good prevailing over evil, simple things, Amar Chitra Kathas. So, and like I said, thanks to the current socio-political situation today, it started making me rethink about those associations with the groups featured in those stories. For example, the work Manthan, there's exceptional tale about eternally fighting two sects, the Asuras and the Devas. and they exceptionally collaborate in their eternal conflict for power. And ironically, the Devtas were the good guys, they emerge as victorious, they get all the things, and the Asuras are just exploited and left with nothing. And we know this, but we've always sided with them, and we thought that was the right thing to do because we were living stereotypes. So I think, all of my work really current practice, it's giving me, the methodological references are giving me a chance to think about climate change, to think about immediate stereotypes, to think about, reflect on political or cultural systems that exist. And these are stories very close to my heart. And I'm trying to, the timelessness of these stories, and I'm trying to weigh our current circumstances, racial differences, class differences, and it's like a Atma Manthan, it's like a self-reflection which is churning out these amazing directions for me to sort of visualize these concerns through an aesthetic which predominantly borrows from the city that I have lived in forever. Because as we all would know that how Jaipur is an artisanal city based in assortment of handicraft traditions. So it's a very, very collaborative, inclusive, secular space. Its foundation by Savai Jai Singh was based on that. And every mohalla, every gully has practitioners of different traditions that depend on each other, that have a symbiotic relationship with each other. And those are the bits that inform the visual outcomes of my practice. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, definitely for those of you who have not seen these works, you must definitely go. I'm going to push you a little bit more. I'm going to just ask one more question, and if we can have an informal enough conversation. It's just a few of us here. But one of the things that came to my mind was quite cinematic when I saw your work, and it's this phrase that is, how can Islamic arabesque sit alongside Rochenko in the world, And how does that happen? How do you use montage and collage of one form on the other? And what you've made quite distinct in this work is that those come reflectively and quite naturally within the composite nature of the culture of Rajasthan for you. So I'm going to use that, if you can respond to that. But if I can go around to use that as an idea of something, just coming back to the title over here, is the idea of a migrancy, is something, how does that play out within the context of your diaspora, if you consider yourself a diasporic artist or not? Is this actually an art of diaspora, or is it an art of any spora, because every place becomes a home that you have to adapt to and can belong to? So is migrancy in one sense the right kind of word to use? What is the self-description that you are comfortable with at this moment in time? But let's start with you, Nandan, and then we just go around with that question.
So very quickly, like I said, the communities work in a symbiotic relationship. And if you take a walk through the heritage city, so basically I've been documenting architectural details across Jaipur, across Rajasthan for a few decades. And those have sort of become literal direct references in my work. And much like this sense of internal displacement that I feel with my physical environment, which is also changing on the physical face value of it. And so through my work, I try to reimagine that these values, these aesthetic historical references, when they go through redundancy, and what may happen to them in their afterlife, or what may become of them, do they exist only as digital archives, or there can be something more to them? So that's what I'm trying to explore through my work. And just like I was saying, that if you have a walk through the walled city, in fact, I was telling Rahab, and I'm not going to get into the direct reference, but somebody says we are trying to fix their mistakes. There's a certain group in history who supposedly made mistakes, and you see those mistakes are these beautiful, colorful architectural details that brings the whole world to our country for that I'm very, very with gay abandon using them in my work. And like salt in water, they are so integrated, they are just so part of our daily life, our windows, our darwazas, our language, whether it's any institution of any orientation, religious, political, in Rajasthan has this very, very integrated aesthetic that can never be separated, and that forms our collective coexistence if only we just take a sort of a note of it, you know.
Shaima, can I ask you to answer that question, please?
To begin with, I don't come from an artistic background. I studied business, economics, real estate, and was very bad at that. But then after I moved to Qatar, I was sort of exposed to a lot of artists by way of, you know, them also focusing on building the country as this hub for culture and arts. And, you know, working within the Film Institute as well, I was, you know, close to a lot of artists, and I was always exposed to their way of thinking. And again, that's when I decided to, you know, pick up the camera and, you know, talk about the things that I continue to question. But it's, I don't know if I want to categorize my art as diaspora art, because truly, you know, we are living in the result of all these political decisions that have infiltrated its way into our lives on a personal level. And I mean, because of that, I guess it speaks to, you know, a portion of the population or the world in which feels like it's in a specific spora. But more than anything, I guess a lot of it has to do with me trying to question and understand, you know, how it is that we ended up here today as a people. You know, we live in a world where there's so much technological advances, and it's so easy to travel, but it's so hard to move. And I don't know if I have a specific answer to a question, but I think it being boxed in that sort of category, it could be true, and it doesn't necessarily have to be, yeah. What was the question? So I can translate it.
Well, I guess for Hicham, it can be about, it's difficult to make that distinction between what is migrant, what is not migrant, because everyone is coming from mixed heritage.
Yeah.
That certain mixture is the most basic recognition we can give one another. But I guess when it comes to Hicham's work, living between France, going to Morocco, the question can really be about the perception of his work in Morocco right now, if he's shown it there and so on. It seems like a lot of the work that he's producing is there, while based elsewhere. So is there a specific reason for that? And what is his relationship to that space he keeps going back to? Naturally, his family is from there. Yeah. But is there a tension there for him? While Shaima answers that, please continue. She said something quite wonderful, and when you see her exhibit, you will see what it means. She might not say it right now, but she said something that struck me. She said, "My film is like a love letter to my father." It's a recognition of all that he did for us as a family. It's a very distinct way in which you describe that moment. Sorry, please.
هناك فرق كبير ما بين الرؤية المغربية لأعمالي والرؤية الغربية. ببساطة عندما أعرض في المغرب، المغاربة يضحكون وعندما أعرج في الغرب الغربيون يعني كيشوفوا الأعمال بواحد الجدية وبواحد
وهل يضحكون لأنه هو الموضوع بالنسبة لهم شكله سخيف ولا يضحكون على مشاكلهم؟
لا، يضحكون لأنه عندما لا نفهم شيئا نضحك.
So he's saying that there's a very distinct difference between perception of how the Moroccans see his work in Morocco and how the West sees his work about Morocco. And particularly what's very strange is the fact that in Morocco people actually laugh at his work, and which is why I asked, are they laughing because they don't know what it's about, or are they laughing at themselves? And he says it's because they don't understand it, and it's just because it looks weird and strange, and that's the response. Versus when he showcases in the West, they have this very serious academic way of analyzing and looking at things, and so it's a two different ends of the spectrum when it comes to perception.
Ali, can we have your response?
You have a specific question for me?
Yeah.
Tell me again, or repeat it, or
I will repeat.
explain it very well.
Okay, I'll explain it well. So I guess with one thing I want to say about Ali's work, this is the work that is stuck in transit. It's arriving. It's going through its own little journey of borders and barriers and no visas and God knows what.
And sporas.
And all kinds of sporas are going on with your work at the moment. We found an incredible way of showing it in the interim, but the works will arrive in a few days, we hope, and will be displayed there. I guess without describing your work, I wanted you really to respond about this question of changing location and nationality, nationalism, right? Those, we were talking about it earlier as the journalist, as the work that you were doing. You've created a context in your work which is all about people who are in transit in one way or the other, who have been moved, right? We know in 2024, 100 million people were dislocated from their homes. Right? This is probably the largest displacement that has taken place in history. Just happened last year. So, on the one hand, your work documents this, but it's also, I mean, for me, when you talk about your work, when you're looking at that, when you've taken that displacement as a form of representation, what has that done to your perception, self-perception, you yourself coming into frame, not just the lives of others, but your life?
Okay, thanks. I think from dislocation from Pali Tokyo to displacement, I think it's worked together. And then I don't know the names very well. What I do, it's just coming directly. And then it's fit with the names, with the things which is go. I think it's worked very well. I can't avoid myself from dislocation, displacement, exile, because already we were in the same position. We move from childhood. We move from town to town to just save ourselves, place to place. Several times with displacement, it's was a part of the life. But the things when I'm thinking about until now, I'm don't tell myself it's unique in Iraq or in that area or my town or between my friend or families, let's say. But something has happened. It's crazy, When I'm stop art at 2009, but already I document from 2003, and I introduced myself to the journalism, let's say, and the opposite side also. Something is happening. My brain's shift because some amazing teacher, foreigner, they came to show us how we can tell the stories and to describe our situation, because they told us you are Iraqi or you are Kurdish or you are. But this is your responsibility. You have the tools, you have the things, you need to do it. And 10 days changed all my life. Everyone against me, my family, my wife, everyone, for first time, but also the support in a way. But they against the ideas because freelance, it's not work in Iraq. There's no way of freelancing. You need to be related by school, by work, by, you know. And then I decided to go through this big challenge to be free to describe something. And then I start to work about pain of others. I start to try to bring document from 2003, what's happening, how the families of Iraq faced the hard situation still until now. And then I went 2, 3 months, 4 months to meet people from south to north. I didn't know Iraq. I didn't move that much. You know, between some governor, we moved. And then there was first time to discover Iraq. I was like almost 30, 31. It was crazy. And then I started to hear a lot of stories. And stories from the people, which is, they speak about them generation from First World War, Second World War, especially what happened, especially in Iraq with the colonization, British. And then I start to have honest stories from the families. I didn't go to media, you know, maybe some books, some sources, but I start to be the person, document everything directly from the people with a very professional way, which is I start to know how I can use these tools. Then we come back to the discussion, dislocations. That dislocation, it's woke me up again, you know, it was last year's. I was like, okay, why dislocation? And then I understand dislocation is a part of our daily life. Even if you are not, if there is no wall, like the kids, which is they came to this life, this the first dislocation of the mother. Why he's crying? It's strange, and he need to hold it. And I think every time when I displacement, or I'm like the kids, I'm scared, strange, new life. You know, I don't know what's happened. And when first time your kid is going to the school, see what's happened. He's crying, he's scared. And when you go to college or university, you displacement or dislocate from your country. And see how this person feeling. Ask him, it's the same, which is I displacement from war, but different situation. But the feeling I'm speaking about, I'm working about that feeling. Every feeling same. My work, it's about human being. I have a lot of faith on people's and situations, and then I think it's very, very hard. Sometimes I stop and the position, my shoulders coming down. There's crazy, crazy stories and archive to try to deal with. I come back to, and I go on the situation with them, and I come back. Then the displacement, it's show me something else, how I could describe more during 8 years work in Paris with a school. It's collect to be out of the country to see it from different perspective, who I am now, or what's happening now. I think I feel not that much heavy in the shoulder because I transfer a lot to the stones. The stones start to hold this heaviness or the stories of memories, to hold it behind me, to find a new language to speak with the people. Not only me, I will speak, the work start to speak without any explanation.
Right. Thank you. Well, this is exactly the work that has not arrived yet, but we hope it will come very soon. And there are these incredible stones, edicts, artifactual objects that are on their way here. But I would like to thank all of you. It's for many the first time in India, certainly for all three of you, your first exhibition in India. And even if it's a temporary home, I'm extremely grateful to all three of you, all four of you, for this wonderful opportunity we have to see your work. So thank you. Thank you very, very much. I think we can keep it fairly informal, just mill around rather than make it an open convo. Is that okay with you? Okay, well, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right,
Much.
thank you very much.